All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Addicts Podcast, Season 2, Episode 10. Today, our guest is Keith. So, Keith, I always start out, of course, just letting everybody introduce themselves to everybody. So, just introduce yourself, and then we'll get rolling from there.
Okay. Hi, I'm Keith Evans. I'm the author of two books, The Hayes House Ghost for People 2, which is available only ebook on Kindle. And I'm also the author of Vampires Dead or Alive, which is available paperback on Amazon and ebook on Kindle. And I've been a paranormal researcher since I was about 4 years old. And I got into it because I noticed empathic abilities. There were certain things about relatives' house. We had a relative that had a house in the family for about since 1850, and this was probably a little over 100 years uh, in the early 1960s when I was in the house. And I noticed I was picking up on enjoying certain things about the house, like the glossy wainscoting where you could see the bare wood and grain, and it made me very happy. I'm not sure why. I know now I was picking up all the joy and the pride that it brought my family members prior to me who had lived there. And I think as an empath, you probably have a greater connection to blood relatives who have passed away than other people who have passed away. So, and that's how I started doing paranormal research, and my family pretty much flipped out over it, so I just went underground. I did paranormal research in a primitive way, up until probably 2011 when I bought my first piece of equipment. So you have to survive, and when people think that you have a problem because you want to do paranormal research, or because you think the way you think about the data you receive when you do paranormal research, then you just have to hide it. I would occasionally invite friends to join me on paranormal, situations where I was out doing research, and they all turned me down. So being a paranormal researcher is rough. I've lost girlfriends over paranormal researching. You know, you go someplace and you say, okay, we're here. Now I want to do some paranormal researching. And they look at me and say, no, you're not going to bring any ghosts in where I'm sleeping tonight. So it makes it rough. It really does.
I definitely relate. Yeah, I got started as a kid, like you said, just like you did, because I realized I had a gift. I call it a gift today. Back then, I didn't necessarily look at it as a gift, but now I
Right.
know it's a gift. I've learned how to use it. And just like I grew up and I still live in not only the Bible Belt, but I live in the heart of the Bible Belt. I'm down here in Western Kentucky. We have a church on every corner. So I got a lot of negative feedback growing up about I was told that I must worship the devil and that I'm a tool of Satan and all that stuff. So yeah, I definitely relate. Yes. So
I've been told
yeah,
the same thing. And I've
yep,
also
yep.
been told, because I think there's ghosts and spirits, that somehow I'm either have a psychological problem, or I have a mental deficiency, or I'm just not very bright. I've been told all those things since a little kid. And
Yeah, same here. Same here. And then like you were saying, so when I first decided to actually start investigating using my gift, I was about 12, 13, and I
now,
was
what
lucky
is your
enough that
gift?
I can see and speak with them.
Okay. Now,
So
I cannot say I can see or speak with them, but I know that they're there, and I know that certain things they do, like unusual knocks, anything that they do around the house, like turn off a light, turn on a light, put down the toilet seat, stuff like that. And most of
right,
that happens and I'm not even doing paranormal research. So I know something's going on. And of course, it's very hard to prove to someone until it happens to them. And then when it
Exactly.
happens to them, they change their tune really quick.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Like like I said, when I was 12 or 13, my best friend at the time, he's no longer with us. He passed away in a car wreck the year after we
Uh oh.
graduated in high school. But
Uh
we were
oh.
best friends from kindergarten until '94, which is when he passed away. And to be honest, not skipping ahead in my story too much, but to be honest, I still feel like he's with me in some investigations because like things were happening that only he knows about. Like there would be like we'll be investigating somewhere. Tracy's two big things was the paranormal field and fishing. So we'll be investigating some random place, and out of nowhere there'll be a fishing lure on the kitchen table, and we may be at the Monroe House in Indiana. So so there's no reason for there to be a fishing lure, but there is. So to me, that's Tracy still with me. But anyway, so
That's
we
cool.
started. So when we were 13, we decided we was going to go all in the paranormal field, and so obviously this was before ghost hunters and ghost adventurers and all that stuff. So and like we already covered, heart of the Bible Belt. So we're getting all kinds of pushback. So while all of our friends are going to like the haunted attractions, the local haunted house or whatever, me and Tracy spending nights in actual haunted houses. Houses are actually haunted, and then we start checking out every book we can on paranormal psychology, ghost, vampires, rural, everything, anything we could check out. And we actually got called down to the principal's office because apparently the books made put us on a watch list. So yeah, so I definitely feel that. And then, so I didn't actually get much support. Like what was odd is my immediate family, like my mom, my grandmother on my mom's side and stuff, they supported my gift because now we've researched it now, and reason we think I inherited my gift because my great grandmother was the Cherokee medicine woman.
Cool.
So so they think that's how I got my gift. So, but then when I finally moved away, I joined the army, went to college on a baseball scholarship, did all that stuff. That's when I really started investigating. That's the reason I claim 33 years of investigating. So because that was 92. So when people ask me how long I've been investigating, I say 33 years, but really it's probably more like 40. You know,
Cool.
so yeah, so I definitely get that. So that brings me to the next question. I noticed that that's one thing we have in common besides both having some gift is we're both veterans of the army. So I appreciate you. I thank you for your service.
Yeah,
I was
thank you for
actually
your service.
it was a privilege. I was actually the fourth generation to go in on my dad's side. My dad actually retired as a command sergeant major. So yeah, so yeah,
Cool.
and then my grandfather, his dad, my pampa is what I called him. My pampa was actually a JAG officer. So yeah, I didn't, I didn't know him when obviously when I knew my pampa, he was actually working for the post office. He retired from the service, and then he was working for the post office. So yeah, yeah. So and then the thing I always found most interesting about your background, your bio, whatever, however you want to put about it, is that you did you're a forensic scientist. So I think that can definitely relate to the paranormal field. Because myself. So my question is, we just skipped over the icebreaker questions if you notice that. But that's okay. We don't need them. The icebreaker questions are for when you need them. So we don't need them. But yeah, let me go ahead and ask the
What
icebreaker
question
questions.
did we skip?
The icebreaker questions are the first one's two parts for you, Keith. The first one is what is your favorite location you've investigated, and then what is your bucket list location you want to investigate.
Well, I guess my favorite location would probably be the Hayes house. And that's because I've had a connection with the Hayes, at least the Hayes family that had passed away. I've had some connections with them after I stopped doing paranormal research. So I would say that's probably my favorite place. And it just seemed to me, as an empath, my abilities are only there if it's like a family member who's passed away and I'm at their house, and or I'm doing prolonged paranormal research at a person's house who has passed away, who lived at that house for 50 some years. And Kathleen Hayes had actually lived at the Hayes house for about 54 years before she moved into a assisted living facility. And I think it was 1996. So I'm able to pick up on people with my empathic abilities only if I have a whole lot of time to do paranormal research in an area. And I had that opportunity because the lady that owned the house was an artist, and she rented out rooms to Airbnb, and she rented out space for artists to also have a quiet place to paint. And she just gave me a key and say, just be discreet, but go anytime you want and do paranormal research. So that really gave me a chance to really feel, and all I really felt about uh, Kathleen Hayes is she wanted a family to enjoy the Hayes house the way her family did. For instance, like they had every year from the time her and her husband Pat Hayes purchased the house in 1942, the family met there for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So there was a lot of happy memories there, especially in the kitchen and the dining room. And I could feel those happy memories. And of course, that makes me happy. So it's almost like being a part of a family that you've never really met. I don't know how to say that, but I had an
I,
experience
I don't think you. I
after.
think that's one of those things you just have to be able to. You have to be able to feel it. Since I don't think you can explain that, but I know what you're saying. You feel you're emotionally in that, even though you're not really there. You're emotionally tied with them. They're making you
Yeah,
feel like you're. I follow you.
I feel like I've known them or I've met
Right.
them. And the nice thing about it, I don't know if you remember Hurricane Michael. It hit
Mm-hmm.
the panhandle of Florida uh, October, I think, 9th or 10th of 2018. And I had just had kidney failure about a year before. And I really was feeling weak and just didn't feel like leaving. So I stayed, and that was a mistake. At one point, I was standing on the toilet in the bathroom and the water was over my head. And I pushed off from the toilet, and the top of my head hit the ceiling. And there was just enough room between the ceiling and my mouth to get a gulp of air. And then the back door broke out. And when that broke out, the bathroom door broke out. The bathroom door was shut. And when those two doors broke out, the water level went down. And that's the only thing that saved me from drowning. But I really felt calm because I felt like Pat and Kathleen Hayes were with me during that hurricane. And I don't know how to explain that I knew they were with me, but I didn't feel like any of my family members were with me. My family would just say, well, if you're too stupid to leave town, you deserve what you get. And I really feel like Pat and Kathleen Hayes were with me, and I survived. And to tell you the truth, anytime you're in I should say, experience that raises your adrenaline, that helps you to heal. So I think Hurricane Michael actually helped turn me around because I wasn't healing that well from having kidney failure. And when you have kidney failure, there's a whole lot of other problems. For instance, like your distal ends, your fingers, your toes, they lose blood because your body is pushing all that blood towards your kidneys, who are damaged and can't handle it anyway. But that's what your body does. So I had developed. gangrene in two of my toes, dry gangrene in two of my toes um, on my left foot. And that was taking a long time to heal. And even after that, one of the toes developed a bone infection, which required a series of shots for like, it seemed like forever, but it was either 2 or 3 months. So the bottom line is, I think that turned me around and started me to really heal. So it was like an adrenaline rush to uh, be right there close to the eye of the hurricane and survive. And maybe that's what I needed to turn things around. And after that, I've been doing great. So, and I thank Pat and Kathleen for being there for me. That was really kind of them. And so that was just comforting. And that's the whole way I felt about doing the paranormal research there at the Hayes House in Apalachicola, Florida. And I think just about everyone who's read the book, it's 340 pages long, they find the same way. They find it a very comforting book. Now, some people aren't into paranormal to feel good about it. You know, if you're into paranormal just to be frightened, then I don't know if reading my book will do it, even though there's parts in the book that people do find frightening. So, like the different types of, I guess, cold areas that I saw that were almost like silhouettes. I didn't even know at the time I was doing paranormal research in what was Pat and Kathleen's bedroom. I know it was the center room on the southwest side of the house, and I saw three silhouettes. With not visually through my eyes, but visually through the thermal camera. At that time, I had a thermal imager, which got washed away during Hurricane Michael. But I clearly saw three silhouettes, almost like the pop-up targets that you use in the Army. So, that was just so distinct. I had to like look away and look with my own eyes, which when I looked away from the thermal imager, there was nothing there. And then in the opposite corner, which was the northeast corner, I had a cold area which was very thin and ran from the bottom corner of that northeast wall to the top corner. And I think that was Pat Hayes because they say he was very tall and very thin. I think he was like 6'3" with either a 28-inch or a 30-inch waist. And I'm like 5'8" and I have like a 38-inch waist. So anyway, and I think in the opposite corner, the southwest corner, the three silhouettes that I saw were probably Kathleen Hayes, Pat Hayes' wife, Sunshine Gibson, which would be Pat's mom's sister, who lived at the Hayes house. And I think the other silhouette, the third silhouette, was Annie Hayes, which was Pat's mother. And she had gotten remarried, and her name was Palmer. So anyway, I was just when that happened, I didn't know how to take it. I was just kind of overwhelmed by the paranormal response that I received with the. I'm trying to remember the name of the flare thermal imager. Seemed like maybe PCR 67 or something like that. But anyway, I thought, well, maybe they don't want me to do paranormal research. And I was really gun ho. Besides taping it with two different tapes from two different angles, videotaping it, I was also taking notes, how I felt, what I saw, when I saw it, who I thought it was. I was taking copious amounts of notes. So when I wrote the book, so anyway, after that day, I had forgot all about seeing those um, four cold areas that look like pop-up targets on the northwest corner, and just a long, skinny pole on the southeast corner. I had forgotten all about it until I went to write the book. And then I was reading the chapter and I thought, I'd forgot all about that, because that day I was about ready to say, well, maybe they don't want me to write the book. And it was such a thing that if I'm in a place where I feel the ghosts of spirits would rather me not write a book about it, then I won't. So somehow they helped me to forget all about that until it was time to write the book. And had I not taken copious notes, I may have not remembered. So it is, I guess you could say, strange or unusual how ghosts and spirits can interact with us and attempt to manipulate us. In this case, they did not want me to give up on the book. And me, like most other people, whenever we have an overwhelming paranormal experience, we tend to think that it's negative. And in this case, it wasn't. I think it was Pat meeting me, when I was standing in their bedroom. And I think it was the other three silhouettes were, you know, his mom, Annie, and his mom's sister, Sunshine, and his wife, Kathleen Hayes. And the strangest thing about the three silhouettes, the one in the middle kept fading in and fading out. Like you had three, and then the one in the middle would disappear. Then you'd have two. And I think in the one in the middle was Annie Hayes, because she did not live at the Hayes house, but she had her own room, and she would come on the weekends and visit her and her husband. So, and they visited quite often. I was told by other relatives it was probably maybe 2 or 3 times a month they would come and visit and stay for the weekend, and in holidays also. And so I think she was the one that was kind of, you know, her coldness would be there as like a dark silhouette. In this case, it was either black or dark blue, and it would fade in and out. And but I think I had misinterpreted what had happened that day as being negative, and the ghosts of spirits at the Hayes house had helped me to forget it, so I would continue on with the book. And I think they're happy with the book. And I think anyone that reads the book hopefully will gain a new perspective on paranormal and stop thinking of all paranormal as being Halloween scary, because being scared is fun. Being scared is not fun. If your life's in danger or you're going to be harmed, it's not fun. There's better ways to have fun, like communicating with a ghost that's been dead for a while and trying to find out about their life by showing them a lot of respect. Because anytime you meet a person, if you make them feel like they're valuable to you or they're important to you, and they walk away saying, "Well, I really enjoyed talking to that guy," that's the way you have to make the ghosts of spirits feel. And then some still may not talk to you, because I think a lot of times it's personality. I think if you had four people go to the same area a month apart, they might have different ghosts and spirits react to them, because it's just like anything else. People will kind of gravitate, and ghosts and spirits will gravitate towards whoever they like or feel comfortable with. And some ghosts and spirits may not really like me or feel comfortable with me, and they might feel the different about another person.
Right. I agree. I mean, for whatever reason, most people look at the paranormal field as, like you said, as a negative thing. That's the reason I tend to. I don't even use the word haunted. That's the word everybody uses. Oh, it's haunted. It's haunted. I don't use that word because it does have a negative thing. So my word is it's active. So if something's there, it's active. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily bad. It's probably not. it's
Right.
probably some it's probably somebody there just when you know the story. And then, like you said, you know, I investigate with respect. So when I go into a place, you know, I respect the people who own the house. I respect the house. I respect the property, and I respect the spirits that are there. It's all about respect. So I talk to them just like I'm talking to you. If I'm in a house that was built in 1860 or 1920 or whatever, and I'm breaking out all my fancy equipment, I'm explaining to the ghost what it is, because a ghost from 1920 has no idea what a thermal camera or SLS
Right.
or any of that is. So I'm explaining it to them. I'm asking their permission to take their picture. I'm asking them if they will talk to me. If they do, I'm thanking them for talking to me. You know, so yeah, it's
Right.
all about respect. It's not like you see on some of the shows where you provoke the spirits. Provoking is not allowed. I don't allow that on my team. Uh, you know, you don't provoke the spirits. First of all, why would you want to? Why would you want to make something supernatural mad? I don't want to make it
Right.
some, yeah, you know. And then, like you said, the personality thing is definitely, you know, especially, so go in there with respect, and so, most of the time I get good responses. But like, I've had teammates go in with me, and they may be having a bad day or whatever, but they have a negative attitude, so the spirit won't talk to them. The
Right.
spirit, the spirit, the spirit determines who they want to talk to. And that's the reason, I've had some places. I've been to some places I know is active. Been there. I know it's active, and I'll have another team that will go, and they'll be like, "Well, we didn't experience anything." I'm like, "Well, that's because they chose not to talk to you." I'm like, "Just because they didn't talk to you, don't mean they're not there." I was like, as one of the golden rules to me in the paranormal field is, you never dismiss somebody else's experience. Just because you didn't have an experience doesn't mean Fred over here didn't have an experience. Yeah, so yeah, I completely agree with that. So, and
Yeah, I think
so
a lot of times people will provoke ghosts of spirits so they get the ghost of spirit angry and then they can claim, well, that's evil or demonic or they might harm me. But if you provoke any person, they're going to get angry at you. And that doesn't mean they're evil or demonic. It just means you shouldn't have provoked them.
exact, I'm not dismissing demonic hauntings. I'm actually, I'm actually a trained demonologist. I took demonology training under Bishop Long. So I'm definitely not dismissing demonic, but you're talking about less than 1% of our activity is demonic. So,
I
and then
agree.
then
I agree.
then,
And
then you get
I've
into
never ran across it myself, and which I'm happy that I haven't. But there are evil and good living people. So I agree with you. Why wouldn't there be evil and good dead people? So I know it exists, but I have yet to run across it, and I'm very happy not to run across it. I like to talk to ghosts of spirits who are like me, who want to value an old house, and most of these old houses I go into, the families that live there, spent money to upkeep the house and keep it original. So they have the same goals that I have. I mean, I
right,
haven't
exactly.
purchased an old house yet. Maybe someday, if my books sell well enough, I'll be able to buy an old house and take care of it the way Pat and Kathleen took care of the Hayes house. So
Yeah,
I hope everyone out there is listening, and I hope that this will motivate you to buy the Hayes house. And another thing about the Hayes house, each chapter is like a mini book, and there's like 21 chapters. So you don't have to read the whole book from beginning to end in 1 week to understand the meaning of the book. If you can read one chapter in 1 week, which is probably 30 to 50 pages, you're good to go. You start all over at the next chapter. In the Hayes house, each chapter is about a room or a location at the Hayes house, whether it be the third floor apartment, uh, the second floor, front porch, or the back porch. Every location at the Hayes house is a chapter. The only chapter that isn't about a location at the Hayes house was chapter 1. in chapter one is just a history about the Buck family. I didn't know enough about the Buck family to really know how they used the Hayes house. So I didn't apply that to the first family who built the Hayes house in 1908, which was Jeff Buck. So I just wrote as much history as I knew about the Buck family within the first chapter. Then, starting with the second chapter, it kind of goes in three parts. I'll give the history of the Hayes family and how they used that, say, how they used the dining room. And then I will talk about my paranormal research and the data I received. And then the third part, I will analyze the data that I received. And then that kind of allows everyone who reads the book to read the history, look at the data I received during paranormal research, and then draw their own conclusions. You know, all our past life experiences mold us into what we think and feel. You might read the same data that I read and come up with something totally different from just reading the history in the first part of each chapter. So I challenge people to do that. And I think people have enjoyed the book because it's somewhat interactive. You don't have to just go by my opinion. You can form your own opinions as you read.
I like that. That's kind of how, as we discussed the other day, I'm actually working on my first book, and that's kind of how I'm writing it. So the first three chapters is basically like a introduction to the paranormal field, but unlike there's a lot of books like that out there, but I'm actually putting my personality in it, so it's fun. You get,
That's
it's not
good.
just, and then after that, I go to some of the more famous locations I've been to, like the Monroe House, places like that, and I give the history, and then I give I captured. This is what I captured on the EMF reader. This is what I captured in the thermal. This is the evidence I captured, and then they make up their own mind if it's activity there. And backtrack a little bit. We were talking about how spirits can be good or evil, and that even taking out the demonic thing. A lot of the YouTubers, they like to say demonic because they get more likes. I say
Yeah,
demons, so I get 20 more likes. But there
you'll be
definitely
more
are.
popular.
Yeah, there definitely is malicious spirits out there. But what I tell people all the time, what you have to remember, if somebody was a dickhead when they were alive, they're going to be a dickhead when they're dead. So
Right.
that doesn't mean they're demonic. That just means they're malicious. Like we ran into one. We were investigating. This is probably the most. It's not demonic, but it was the most malicious location we ever investigated. It was 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago now that we investigated. So they shut the location down for 3 years because of how violently haunted it was, and they opened it back up. And when they opened it back up, we were the second team to make it out there. The name of the place is the Anderson Hotel, and so
Cool.
their claim is that their ghosts bite. So so excuse my language, but I wanted to call bullshit on that because I've been doing this for like 30 some odd years, and I've been touched, I've been pushed, I've had things thrown at me, but I've been scratched, but biting for a spirit to bite somebody, that's a lot of energy. So I didn't believe that, but there was claims. So I also didn't want to dismiss anybody's claims. So anyway, we get there. We get there, and the first thing to realize, well, two things to realize. One, they call it the Anderson Hotel, but it's a transit hotel. We're not talking about like the Hilton or something. It's a transit hotel. People just come and stay because they don't have money, that kind of stuff. So that's what kind of hotel
Right.
it is. So that's the first thing you have to understand. The second thing you have to understand: the people that own the building now, they want it to be violently haunted. So there's five verified murders, suicides, deaths in the hotel. And I'm talking about being verified by coroner reports, newspaper, or police reports. When I verify something, I verify it. You know what I'm saying? Uh, as a forensic scientist, you should appreciate that. If I say something's verified, it's verified. I don't do the hearsay stuff. So they have
Right.
five. They have five verified death, murder, suicides there. So of the five verified, of three of the death, murder, suicides, they still have the bloodstained mattress in the hotel. Then
Wow.
the fourth one, they still have the bloodstained bathtub because she committed suicide in the bathtub. And then the guy lived there. And this is going back to, if you're a dickhead in life, you're going to be a dickhead dead. Well, he lived there, and everybody says he was just an asshole. Well, he was an alcoholic, and he drunk himself to the point that he hung himself in the closet.
Wow.
All of his liquor bottles are still there, right? And they encourage people to bring liquor bottles for him. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And he
Right.
also ran prostitutes in and out of there. So he's just a dickhead. So the three most famous rooms there uh, is the one with the bathtub. So I'll start my story there. So that's where we started. We did the walkthrough and all this stuff. So before we even get started, the first thing that was interesting about the location, like I said, it was shut down for 3 years because of how violent the hauntings were. So in these 3 years that it was shut down, the owners decided it'd be a good idea to make it into a haunted attraction. So they put a haunted attraction in an actual haunted location. Well,
Right.
I understand people have to make money. Well, they thought it'd be cool if somebody painted a voodoo symbol in one of the rooms. Well, that's one of those things, you don't mess with stuff if you don't know what you're doing. So
Right.
they they just picked this voodoo logo. They just picked a voodoo symbol that they thought looked cool. With the one that they ended up painting on the wall was one that opened up the gates of hell.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
So
horrible.
that yeah. So that's how we start our investigation. So then so then so we had to travel 6 hours for this investigation. So we always divide up into teams, but before we divided up, we decided to start out together in the room with the bathtub. With the backstory in the bathtub was that there was a 33-year-old young lady, and she checked into the hotel specifically to commit suicide in the bathtub. Her husband and her kid had just got her husband or her kid had just got killed in a wreck, and she was grief
Uh-oh.
stricken. So that's where we start out. And when I say a bathtub, I'm talking about like the old fashioned kind with the claw feet.
Right.
So we get there, and like we already discussed, I'm a respectful investigator. So I asked permission to get in the bathtub. We're videotaping. We got a voice recorder. I got my Paratech. We got everything going. And I asked if I could get in, and the response was yes and no. I was like, well, I can't do both, so I get in there, and everything's going along fine. So my rule is, if a spirit tells me to get out or leave, I don't immediately do it because I'm there to find answers, and to help them. So, but
Right.
if they tell me on the third time, if I'm told 3 times to get out, I do. So fast forward, we finally get to the third time it tells me to get out. So, like I said, this is an old-fashioned bathtub. So I'm trying to get out. My team's helping me out. I have both arms pushing myself out of the bathtub. Well, I feel what feels like a really deep Indian burn on my calf. Like one like your high school bully would give you. And so when we got back to a base where we had lights and electricity, I have what looks like a double bite on my leg.
Oh.
I actually even got a tattoo of it. Hold on. I think, well, I can't see it. The camera's not going to clear over. But I actually got a tattoo of it because I wanted to make sure I always had it with me. So that's how our investigation started. So then from there, we went to what's probably the most famous room. Uh, this room, this 22-year-old, no, 19-year-old, somewhere between 17 and 19-year-old kid. I mean, and at that age, you're still a kid. comes all the way from Michigan to this little town in Kentucky. Nobody knows why. She has no connections. Uh, the only thing you can piece together by what she left behind and everything is she got heartbroken and she was trying to start over or whatever. So anyway, she for some reason with a crayon, nobody even knows why with a crayon. She wrote Bible verses on pieces of paper and she drew like sketches like mountain ranges and stuff and had, with Bible verses and she hung them over the room. And all of them are still all over the room. Where she ended up committing suicide on there, and her bloodstained mattress is still there. I mean, she bled out, and all the blood's still there. And
Wow.
so and she does not like to talk to guys. So like we let our females talk to them because they had a better response. She does not like guys. So me and Dennis, we took off to the room that I told you where the guy lived and all of his liquor bottles. It's called the Blue Room. We take off to there, and before we even get in the room, somebody pushes Dennis, and Dennis is a big guy. Dennis is like 5'10", 240 in muscle. I'm not talking about and somebody pushes him down. Well, so I
Wow.
decide. So I decide for some reason with my gift, I decide I need to go in the closet where the guy hung himself. As soon as I stepped in the closet, something drained all my energy and I hit the ground. Dennis had to actually pull me out of the closet.
Wow.
So then we do our thing. We have our EVP session in
Where was this? Where was this place at again? What town?
Lawrenceburg, Kentucky.
Orangeburg, Kentucky. I've never had I've never had a place quite like that. Um, One time I was scratched, but it was almost like a sunburn. I saw it, and I think I took a picture of it. But as soon as I saw it, it was starting to light up, and it was like not a thumb, but maybe three or four fingers. And I just, I took a picture of it, but 15 minutes it was gone. It was more like a sunburn, and I didn't really feel a scratch or notice anything. I just kind of saw it in the mirror when I went to shave because I had done some paranormal research and I was going to shave, and then it was right about here. And sometimes I think what happens is the ghosts of spirits touch you to try to like
Get your attention.
maybe hug you from behind. And when they touch you, somehow their electromagnetic energy is transferred into your skin like a sunburn.
Right.
That's the only time that I ever remember having a possible scratch. And that also was in Apalachicola, Florida. I can't say where it was because I don't have permission from the
Right.
location to say. But can I show everyone both of my books really quick because sometimes a
Yeah.
picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, please do because we're
I'll
getting
try
ready to
to
talk
get
about
it
it.
centered. This is the Hayes House Ghoster People too. Now the Hayes House is no longer available in paperback, but it is available ebook on Kindle. So, and my other book that we need to talk about is
Yeah, we'll get ready to talk about it.
Vampires Dead or Alive. Now, Vampires Dead or Alive is available paperback on Amazon and other places where good books are sold. And it's also ebook on Kindle. So,
I got
did you have
I
a
got my
question
copy
for
on
me
there.
about Vampires Dead or Alive?
We'll get yeah. I got my copy on Amazon just so everybody knows. So yeah. So let's talk about vampires still alive. First of all, why vampires? What drew you to vampires?
Well, when I was a child, having to kind of not talk about my paranormal experiences and hide it from my family so they wouldn't think that, I was, I think at one point my mother said I was mentally retarded or I was gay or I was crazy. I had psych problems because if I talked about the paranormal, she equated it to something religiously that would be unacceptable to society society, and that really bothered me because I was none of those things, and I just kind of kept it to myself. So there was a TV program, which you didn't have many TV programs in the 60s or even the 70s that were paranormal related, and it was called Dark Shadows. It was a British sitcom, and to me, the hero of the show, other people may not think so, was the vampire called Barnabas Collins. And he was like my childhood hero. And I was in middle school the first time I saw the program, and it only lasted for like 3 or 4 years. So that's what started me thinking about how can vampires do what they do. And I also thought about, well, are vampires dead or are they alive? So I thought, why don't I write a book about vampires and do like a comparison and contrast as far as each uh, characteristic about a vampire. Say, like vampire's ability to shapeshift, the change from a vampire to a bat. How can he do that? So in my book, I try to explain how he does that. And I also look at whether that's a characteristic of a living person or a dead person. And really, I don't know too many living or dead people that can shapeshift. So that would have to be none of the above. But that's the way the book is written. And I try to go with, there's at least 10 chapters in the book. It's a very short book. It's only like, less than 50 pages long. But the book is just no fluff, no build up. It's just the meat and potatoes about a certain characteristic, a historical characteristic about a vampire, whether it's more like a dead person, a living person, and then my opinion, scientifically, in most cases, how a vampire can do what they do, like shapeshift. So if you read the book, there's going to be a good bit of science. Uh, as far as I know, to shapeshift, you'd almost have to bend space and time. And I really feel that all of us are reincarnated. And I think we've been reincarnated over, you know, thousands of years. And we might have been a bat, we might have been a werewolf. There might have been times where our spirit stayed a spirit. So if you want to dematerialize, if you had a way, the energy or the power to bend space and time, you could just go back locally yourself, not the whole room you're in and not the person that's maybe trying to kill you. You could just bend space and time for your physical body, go back in time to when you were a spirit, and then that person can't kill you because you just dematerialized. And I think the only way that could be done, you'd either have to multiply the strength of the ley lines of the earth. That's one way. Another way is have a small black hole, which you can use to bend space and time, because a small black hole would be very powerful. But you need a lot of electromagnetic energy in a small area to bend space and time to go back to when you were like a bat, and then you would turn from a physical biological body into a bat's body. So that's the way the book is written. And so far, everyone who has read it has said, well, that just blowed my mind. I would have never thought about the things that you thought about. I would have, excuse me, I would have never thought about explaining how a vampire do what they do. I would have never thought about that. So I find that most people are just flabbergasted once they read my book. And so hopefully
Well,
you'll read my book. Like I say, it's very short, but it's all beat and potatoes. There's no fluff. There's no long build up. And then at the end of the chapter, you get one sentence of new information, and it's all new information. The only thing that's not new is the fact that it's all historical characteristics about a vampire. So, any of those characteristics, how many other people have you read a book or heard them explain how vampires do what they do? So, that is all new information. And everyone has read it so far, just smiled and said, wow, you know. So,
Well, it's very
hopefully, everyone is listening will go out and purchase it. And it's available on Amazon. Other book companies can carry it. All they have to do is get permission from Amazon, and then they can sell it too. And it's pretty much capped at $10. Uh, when I did it, I used Kindle Direct Publishing. They wouldn't let me go any lower than $10 for the paperback book, even though it's about a little less than 50 pages, and they wouldn't let me go any lower on the ebook. The ebook is $2.99. Of course, if you get it on Kindle, you might have to pay shipping and you might have to pay tax also. So, but check it out. I think people will enjoy it. I certainly did enjoy writing that book, and I'm like you. I was thinking about, and I had started writing a book about. Everyone asked me, "Well, you get such good data. Would you write a book about how you do it?" And other people have asked me, write a book about how other people should do paranormal. And I said, I can't tell people how to do paranormal. It's up to the individual personality to figure out their own way. Now, I can tell them, like, how I do paranormal my way or paranormal research my way. I can tell you what works for me, and I thought about writing a book like that. I have like a couple chapters started and an outline, but I've been so busy I haven't got back to it. But I'm not sure if that would be, to me, writing about myself. I don't know if would be as interesting as reading the Hayes House and learning about the Buck and the Hayes family, or reading my book Vampires Dead or Alive. So I'm not sure if the appeal would be there. There seems to be a large appeal for vampires, especially outside of the United States. My sales are much better in Japan, Australia, the UK, and Canada, much better there than in the USA. And so I hope everything keeps going and it gets on a roll. More people buy it, more people talk about it. But I think Vampires Dead or Alive will be my best book that I ever wrote. I don't think I could ever write a better book, because if I just write about my experiences as a paranormal researcher, that's all it is my experience. There's really nothing new than a different way a ghost or spirit responds to me or treats me, or different data that I get. But other than that, I think Vampires Dead or Alive is truly the most unique style book that I could ever write. And I don't think I'll be able to write a better book. I'll write good books, but I like to write what people request for me to write. And I know there's a lot of people want me to write a book about myself and how I go about doing paranormal research, and being able to obtain as much data as I receive. So that's something I'm thinking about doing, but I don't think it would be as good as Vampires Dead or Alive. I think that will be, if I live to be 100 and write a book every year from here on out, I don't think any of the books will be better than Vampires Dead or Alive, because it's new,
so
fresh material that no one else has ever talked about. People might write books in the future about the same subject matter, but and I think that the Hayes House goes for people too. I don't think you'll find a location or a house that had two families that loved and cared for that house the way that the Hayes House was loved and cared for. You might find one equal, but I don't think you'd find one where you had about 100 years of two families cared for a house the way the Hayes House was cared for. The Hayes House was very original, and it was sad when the artist, the lady that gave me written permission to write the book and do paranormal research, when she sold it, the gentleman that owned the motel next door did a lot of rearranging. So a lot of the, you know, I believe in the stone tape theory, and a lot of the Hayes house is no longer original, especially the second floor. I got pictures from a gentleman who was doing construction there, and he had sent me pictures, and the whole upstairs was just pretty much gutted. So all that stone tape theory of, the thoughts and the feelings being absorbed by the wood, all that was gone. So I don't think paranormal research, at least on the second floor, will ever be as good as it was, before they tore all that wood out. And it just,
Yeah,
it made me feel sick to my stomach to see what had been done, you
I
know.
understand that my team is actually in June. We're going to a Cape to a place called the Glen House. It's an 1860 Spanish mansion, and they've kept it all original. So I'm excited about that. But we're actually almost out of time. But I do want to talk a little bit more about vampires dead or alive. So
Did you
you
have
know,
more questions?
yeah, just a little bit more. So as you know, and vampires has been romanticized for decades. Vampires is one of the things that vampires, the phoenixes, or two of the dragons, or three of the mythological creatures that pretty well exist in all cultures. So I think writing on vampires is fascinating, and just like you said, the way you wrote the book is even more fascinating. The fact of dead or alive scientific method. So I've always been fascinated with vampires. Not necessarily the ones you see on Twilight, because vampires shouldn't sparkle, but like true mythological vampires has always been something that has fascinated me. So through your research and writing the book, do you believe that vampires is a real being, or you think it's just a folklore? What's your
I
take on
think
that?
vampires have been on Earth for a long time, and I think they're real. And well, just look how my family looked at me because I wanted to do paranormal research as a 4 year old, and I was able to feel uh, happiness from looking at, as my mother would call, pretty wood, that you could see the wood and grain. When I grew up in the 60s, the house I grew up in was all white drywall, which to me was pretty boring. But when you could see the wood and grain of that wainscoting that was in a house that had been in my family probably a little over 100 years, at least my mother's side of the family, a little over 100 years, I mean, that just made me so happy. And look how my family reacted about it, thinking that I was possibly crazy or possibly mentally retarded or possibly a homosexual. Now, if you can draw all those conclusions from a 4 year old smiling and getting happy because they see wainscoting, how many negative conclusions have been drawn about vampires? And how many of those are wrong? So if it can happen to me, it could happen to a vampire too. So I hate to get off of the subject, but what was your question again about vampires? Sorry.
Uh, you pretty well answered it. Was you, if you thought that vampires were actually exist, or if it was just folklore?
Oh,
And
okay. Let me get back to that because that's a pretty long thing for me to describe. I feel the vampires probably are extraterrestrial. I think they came from a planet, someplace where the Goldilocks zone was far away from a dwarf star, to the point that their sunlight during the daylight was as dim as their moonlight at night. So I think their whole DNA and RNA allows for them to not be in bright sunlight. When they're in bright sunlight, like our medium-sized star, we call the sun, I think it causes their DNA to denature. And denature means it unravels. And that's the reason why when a vampire is exposed to direct sunlight, they scream and they start to actually steam because their body is actually boiling off. It's going from a solid or a liquid and turn it into a gas. So, and that's because they have rapid denaturing of their DNA and RNA. So, I really feel that's because their whole biological system was made to not be out in bright sunlight. Just like if we're exposed to bright sunlight, we'll get cancer. That cancer is actually a rapid destruction of a body part, which, if not cut away, will kill us. And that's no different than a vampire being exposed to bright sunlight and, them not being able to stand it because it's killing them and causing their DNA to unravel. So the bottom line is they probably were close enough to us to interbreed, and they might have been here for thousands of years, interbreeded with humans, and all of us may have a little bit of vampire abilities within us. So there still may be some vampires who haven't interbreeded that are mainly vampires that haven't mixed blood with humans, but I think that has happened. And I would say vampires are more cryptid than paranormal, even though they could fall into all three categories as being extraterrestrial cryptids and also paranormal. And maybe a fourth category of being a different biological species that instead of being afraid of them, we should learn more about them. And, if we can learn more about how vampires can live for a long period of time and how vampires can actually heal from certain illnesses and injuries while enclosed within a coffin with little need for food, water, or air, like they're in deep hibernation, like the way bears do in the wintertime. If we can learn to do that, there's a lot of things we might be able to heal from just by being in a comatose type state. So there's a lot we could learn, but it's sad that most people, especially in America, are more willing to be afraid of something and stay away from it instead of understand it, learn about it, and make life better for everyone with what they learn about, say, a subject like vampires.
I really, really like that answer, Keith. Yeah, I mean, I haven't dove deep into vampires like obviously you have, but like we mentioned earlier, when I started studying paranormal and cryptids and everything, vampires was one of the things I researched. I didn't read Bram Stoker's. I read the actual textbook on. So yeah, and that's yeah. I kind of say, I kind of feel the same way you did. They were an alien species, some kind of, some species that, yeah, I'm definitely along the same line as you are. And, we should learn from them instead of being afraid of, and, I guess one thing that makes me a little bit different than some paranormal researchers, not you, because you're right there with me. I don't just do ghosts. I do cryptids. I do aliens. I do it all. I've actually been on a Dogman investigation. I've actually been on Bigfoot investigation. I have actually even been on a chupacabra investigation. So when I was in the army, I was a medic. I was a combat medic, and of course, I was stationed at Fort Sam Houston when I wasn't deployed. So I actually investigated, went on a chupacabra investigation in San Antonio. So yeah.
I was a combat medic too, so I've been at Fort Sam Houston, and I also have done searches for Bigfoot, but not I've never found him or found very little evidence of Bigfoot. The only thing I found when I was growing up in Maryland was twisted. Uh, Someone would twist like small tree limbs or bushes into a certain unnatural twisting. And I've noticed stuff like that. And of course, my grandparents, they would say, just leave it alone. It's there for a reason. Leave it
Right.
alone. So it was almost like them saying that's Bigfoot's marking. Don't mess with it. Um,
Exactly.
but anyway, yeah, I was at Fort Sam Houston. I didn't. They kept us so busy. I didn't really get time to do anything but try to get some extra sleep if they gave us downtime. So I didn't get to do
Yeah.
anything there paranormal. Uh, uh, I was trying to think. Oh, I wanted to ask you a question. So far, I know you only read a couple chapters of my book. What did you like most about my book? What type of feedback could you give me about? I really enjoyed that part about your book.
Well, to be honest, like I mentioned, in this question, and like you always mentioned, my favorite part of the book is just your style of writing it. Uh, I like reading books. Of course, most of my library is paranormal. I mean, that
Right.
goes without saying. I've been doing this for 33 years, so paranormal. But I mean, I have books that are not paranormal. I got, I got religious books. I got all kinds of books, and the ones I enjoy the most are the ones that are written just like you wrote, did, or a lot. That's written from a research and scientific method. Like my favorite Christian book, if that's what want to call it, is Case for Christ, because it's written from a uh, scientific fake based method, and that's what I like best about Vampires Still Alive. Just like you said, it's just a different writing style, and it has that's the reason like I told you, I was reading in the hospital, and I really didn't want to put it down, but but obviously my wife can't use her hand, so when she says, "Honey, come get me dressed," I have to stop reading and get her dressed. But hopefully, after this weekend, I'll be able to I'll be able to sit down and just read the book. Yeah.
That sounds good. I've never really thought about it, but I've been doing paranormal research since I was 4 years old, and I'm 67. So I've been doing paranormal research for 63 years. And people say, you talk about it like it's so easy. And I guess it's because I've done it so much. It's kind of ingrained in my brain.
Well, we're actually over my time, but that's okay, and nobody's going to kick me off. So I do. So here's a question I always ask everybody. Uh, I didn't really have to ask you any of my pre-made questions because our conversation went so well. But here's one that I always ask everybody, and I think with you, I'm interested in your answer more than I am some of the other people's answers because we kind of come from that same background. I claim 33 years, but like you said, if I actually count when I did it as a kid, I'm looking at 44 years because I'm 51. So so say I started when I was 6 or 7, so 41 years, 42 years. So and then, I grew up the same way. I never, I don't think I ever had anybody tell me I was gay, but the other ones that I was. Uh, I was kind of a pretty boy when I was younger, so so that kind of I guess kept that went away from me. I actually kind of looked like Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. That was actually my hairstyle naturally when I was a teenager. I mean, you can't tell it now because I ain't got any. But so but I mean, I got the you're a tool of the devil, all that stuff. So yeah, so we both relate to that. So anyway, the question is, uh, how do you think the para pop culture? That's my word, para pop culture. Like the TV, YouTube, all that stuff. How do you think the para pop culture has affected the paranormal field, both positively and negatively?
Well, I think a lot of what we see on TV, I don't really watch it anymore, but um, I gave up my cable TV because I kind of live out in the middle of nowhere and they just charge way too much for cable TV. I still have the internet, otherwise, I couldn't do the podcast, but I just feel that I don't know. Most people already have an opinion. And I find that most conservative religious areas, if they don't like something you're doing, whether it's paranormal or anything else that you might do that they might not agree with, they're going to try to give you a negative label, and they're going to try to give you the most negative label they can give you. But I really feel that um, some of the TV programs, I'm not going to mention their names, kind of go into, well, everyone in America is afraid of paranormal. Let's just exacerbate, I think I'm pronouncing it right, exacerbate their fear by giving them what they want. It's almost like knowing if I walk into a room and I know a guy likes comedians, then I'll tell a lot of jokes. So some of the paranormal shows know that people like to be scared, or actually feel that the only place paranormal is within their life is to be frightened by it. Then that's what they give them. They give them results where there's evil and demonic going on. I mean, I look at places like hospitals. How many people in a hospital have found out that they're going to die, or found out that a loved one's going to die? Hospitals are very tragic places where very ill people go, and some die and some you know live. But that's got to leave behind a lot of tragic emotional energy. So when you go to a hospital and you get this tragic emotional energy, you can't always bend it into evil, but there can be a lot of tragic emotional energy out there, which is within a structure, within an environment. It doesn't necessarily mean it's evil. It just means that it's very negative and very sad and very heartbreaking. If you know, I've been divorced for years, and but I know people that have been married for 70 years. Think about the hurt they feel when their husband or wife passes away. I'm not going to feel that type of hurt because I've been pretty much alone since my divorce. So there's a lot of tragedy that goes on that has nothing to do with evil or being demonic. And I think a lot of places have that. And I think a lot of these TV shows are taking that and turning it into something evil or demonic. And that's what, at least in America, that's what the larger amount of the paranormal audience want. Now, me, with the good ghost and good spirit, a lot of people who are actually religious, I've even had podcasts where they would tell me, we can't have you on because your paranormal book, Vampires Dead or Alive, is just too nonfiction and too realistic paranormal. And we have an audience of Christian conservatives that want to hear only about evil and demonic and how prayer overcomes this evil and demonic. And you're not giving us that. So we can't have you on. We might lose customers, and we don't want to lose audience. And I definitely believe in prayer. I when I was in dangerous situations in the army, I prayed my butt off. I prayed more when I was in the army because I didn't want to lose an arm or a leg or get hurt or get killed. I was older than some of the other guys. I didn't join the army until I was 22. But a lot of people. I live in the panhandle of Florida, and most people are very conservative and very Christian. And when they first find out that I'm a paranormal researcher, the first thing, their mouth falls open like that, and the next thing they say, "So you worship the devil?" And I tell them, "No, there's no connection between paranormal research and someone worshiping the devil." And I tell most of them that most of the people I know who are in the paranormal field are Christians, and most of them are demonologists. So they're not pro devil. If anything, they're just pro learning about the paranormal and learning about what we don't understand. And that's
and
what I
helping
want to
people.
try to bring out to people. I want people to want to watch a paranormal show, to learn more about the paranormal, and to actually care about the ghosts and try to communicate with the ghosts. It's all about
Exactly.
paranormal communicating. If I can get the ghost to open up and talk to me, I can learn a little bit about history just from that ghost or spirit.
Yep.
And I think that's far more important than being scared by something that might just be horrible experiences that people had in a hospital, because so many people, if you're in a hospital room, how many people within the hospital room found out that they had cancer and were going to have serious surgery? If that hospital's been there 20 years or so, there every 2 to 3 days there's a different patient in there, and not every patient is in there for something minor. Especially since maybe the 1970s and 1980s, if you have something minor, they'll do it as outpatient surgery. Most people that are in hospitals are deeply sick and have a problem that is probably going to need surgery. So anyway, I hope people will take that to heart, and not not see residual energy that is high in anxiety and stress as being negative or something that's harmful for them, because it might just
Right.
be the environment being real. And when you're in a hospital and people are finding out day after day that they have something that could kill them, and family members come in to visit them, and family members are heartbroken because a loved one's going to die or has a very serious condition, that's absorbed by that hospital and that environment. It's
Yep.
not going to just dissipate because the hospital has been closed down for several years or a decade or so.
Right.
So I just
Right.
want
Yeah.
people to change their mind about what paranormal is and what to expect and want to get out of paranormal research.
I agree. I tell people all the time that I want to I want to leave the when I finally get out of the field, when I retire or whatever, I want to leave the field better than it was when I got into it. And talking about hospitals, like you said, people have to realize hospitals have seen both ends of life. They've seen life come in and they've seen life go out. So there's all kind
Yes.
and there's a hospital there's a hospital that we investigate. I actually use it to train my new team members because my team, we're a large team for a paranormal team. We actually have 15 active members on my team. So we trained at this abandoned hospital in one of the places I consider one of my hometowns. It's in Carroll, Illinois. Anybody that knows anything about Carroll was actually a living ghost town. It used to be a big pre-Civil War and stuff. It was supposed to be a big city. Before the racial riots ended up destroying it, before the racial riots, it was 50,000 people in the 50s. Now it's 2,000 people. So it's a living ghost. So anyway, they have a hospital there, and it used to be a big regional hospital. Uh, it's been abandoned since 1988. So,
Wow.
so it's completely gutted. Nothing. And I've got some of the best. We talked about the thermal camera earlier. That's one of my favorite pieces of equipment because with a thermal camera, you either get something or you don't. So I've got some of the best thermal readings I've ever got there. One of the ones I got is
Wow.
I decided to take a picture of the third floor, and the only people that was up on the third floor this time was me and my two team members, Dennis and Denise. But I decided to take a picture of Dennis and Denise. They were standing over by the wash sink, where they wash the people before they go into surgery. They were standing over by it, and I took a picture. And of course, on the thermal camera, you see Dennis, you see Denise, and then you see a 6'4" heat signature of somebody else.
Wow.
I'm in
That's
perfectly human
cool.
shape. And then,
Yeah,
and then, uh,
that's cool.
and then of course, so, and so, yeah. So to me, the negative to the para pop culture is basically what you said. You have all these people with this, screaming demon and faking stuff because that's what and provoking the spirits because that's what the producers want because it's good TV. So that's the negative. The positive is there's people, there's legitimate paranormal researchers now. That's why they got into the field. It's because they saw ghost hunters or whatever. So that's the positive. The other positive is now when I'm at the grocery store and I'm wearing my Ken 10 paranormal shirt, I still get the you worship the devil, but I also get some of the you mean like ghost hunters. So at least there's a conversation there now. So that's the positives. So anyway, we're 20 minutes over time here, Keith. So let's plug the books again. Tell everybody how to get Vampires Dead or Alive. Uh, and I encourage everybody to get the book, especially the price. You can't beat it. And I'm telling you, the way it's written, you won't be able to put it down. So I encourage everybody to get it. So Keith, tell them how to get your books. Tell them what else you got going on. All that kind of stuff. Plug yourself, and thank you for being on the show.
All right. Well, Vampires Dead or Alive is available paperback on Amazon, online only. And it's also available Vampires Dead or Alive ebook on Kindle. The Hayes House Ghost for People 2 is only available ebook on Kindle. I have a YouTube channel that's called Paranormal Short Sessions by Keith Evans. And I put all my paranormal short sessions and the promos. I usually do 3 or 4 promos per session. And if I'm getting good data, I don't cut away from my promos. I still put them on Instagram and Facebook so that I can advertise my YouTube channel, Paranormal Short Sessions by Keith Evans. But they'll cut away after about 60 seconds. So if you want to see the entirety of my promos, they're actually on YouTube also. I can't think of anything else. Again, if you purchase my book, that means I can do more paranormal research. I can do more. If I could buy an old house and preserve it for future paranormal researchers to enjoy in the future, I would. The more money I make through sales of books, the more money I can donate to places that go in and clean up and mow and rake the leaves and repair tombstones. The more money a person has, the more they can change the world to be a place where a paranormal researcher would be in paradise. So not only are you buying the book because you have something interesting to read and it entertains you and you enjoy it, you're also helping a paranormal researcher to fund his next paranormal research excursion. Now, you had asked me what was my favorite place to do paranormal research, and it pretty much hands down it's the Hayes House Ghost for People 2. But you'd also ask me where would I like to go to do paranormal research, and I definitely like to stay away from places that are heavily traveled. I'd like to go to a family house that no one else has ever done paranormal research. That would be my wish. If that was my dying wish, I want to do paranormal research at a house that was owned by multiple families. Say if the house is 150 years old, I want to do paranormal research at a house where, say, 3 or 4 families lived there for 20 or 30 years each, where there's plenty of paranormal data. That's the ideal place as far as stone tape theory for residual energy. And when a person has spent that much time there in a house, they come back to it after they pass away. They spend time there after they pass away because that's what they really loved. So that would be my favorite place. Not some
See,
famous place because everyone's been there. I don't want to go to places like that. I want to go to a place that no one else has ever been before. I want to be the first one to talk to ghosts and spirits that are happy to see someone come in and show them respect and love the place as much as they loved it when they were alive.
Well, speaking of that, a lot of these famous places. First of all, so many people have been there. Uh, I think, for instance, Waverly Hills. Of course, I've been to Waverly Hills several times, living, being from Kentucky. The first couple of times I went to Waverly Hills was way back before everybody started going there. Matter of fact, the first time I went, we actually had to cut the lock off the gate. We had permission, but we still had to cut the lock off. And
Wow.
so and so when we went there at that time, it was so active, you didn't even have to set up equipment. You didn't even have to ask a question. You could just see the spirits walking down the hallway.
Wow.
And the last time I went, which has been 5 years ago, uh, it's basically been turned into a tourist attraction. And I don't think the spirits like it, so they're nowhere
Right.
near as active. And then the other thing is they're also charging $2,400 for you to go.
Wow.
So, but anyway, talk about places that nobody's ever been to. There's a place, the location that I'm trying to get into. There's only one team's ever been able to go there, and unfortunately, they were disrespectful and did some damage to the location. That's the reason.
Oh.
That's the reason the place told me that eventually they're going to let me do it because again, it's in Cairo where I told you about, and my uncle used to be mayor there, so I have a lot of connections. So they told me eventually they're going to let me do it, but they said during COVID they got so hard, up for money. They allowed this team from Sykeston to come in, and they were disrespectful and stuff. So right now they're putting a hold on it. But anyway, when I get permission, Keith, you're going to have to travel up here and go with me. This building was built in 1820. It's
Wow.
our original. It's our original. It's known as the Magnolia Manor. It's our original. It's such a piece of history. It was General Grant's headquarters during the Civil War,
Wow.
and
Well,
he
send me
stayed there.
some information on it. I like to learn more. I got
I
some
definitely.
stuff planned this year. I got some stuff planned in Florida, short trips. But if I can afford it and I can fit it into my schedule, I'd be more than happy to.
All right. Well, let's get off here. Uh, I'm sure my wife needs me to do something since she can't use her hand. But anyway, thank you for being my guest, and I'll probably have you on again. It might be next season, but I'd love to have you back on. But so everybody get the book Vampires Dead or Alive, and we will see everybody next week when my guest is Josh Purvis for the Searchers. So we will see everybody next week.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being on.